what did you find that was interesting? Those of you who actually found something that you thought was notable? Nick wrote on there that the substance of law is about what?
The primary and principal objects of law are right and wrong.
Right and wrong. So, we always talk about, I said that a few weeks ago, we talk about our rights. I know my rights, right? Well, actually, there are rights and there are wrongs. Okay? So, let me find what we're going to do. Everybody open your book. 2 pages. 240. No, 237. Aaliyah, what did you find in your Blackstone's writing that you thought was significant?
I just found some stuff I think
What was one thing that you found significant?
you get this in the Bible, something about injuring a woman's baby or something.
Say it again, loudly.
To injure a woman so that her baby dies. I think it's in the Bible.
Ah, there's an injury. It's Exodus chapter 21. That's very good. So it talked about an injury when the child is hurt. If a mother's injured, it used to be manslaughter, this Old English, and then it became a misdemeanor. And so it had a really different requirement for the threshold. And I put a little note in there. Those little notes in italics are the notes that I made with regard to, you'd have to read all of Blackstone's commentaries to get the context of that. The Roe versus Wade court said, aha, look at Blackstone said, it's just a misdemeanor. No, he didn't say that. When you go to the crime section, book number 4, he said it is a great misprison, not misdemeanor. He said misprison. He was talking about abortion. And he said it's a misprison. If you look up misprison, it's a capital felony crime that is hidden. There's no way for you to prove it. At the time, they had no technology to acknowledge, to verify that the child was dead prior to it coming out of the womb. They had no mechanism to have the element of proof necessary for a conviction. So they called it, if you go to the crime section, he goes into detail about this. It's a great misprison. In the Roe versus Wade court, they actually just quoted this part. And they went to the Bible. It's in the Bible. Exodus 21:21. They said, look, if a man is fighting and they injured a woman and she has a baby, then he shall pay the husband's price, whatever he asked for. So it was merely a civil offense. No, liar, liar, pants on fire. Go to the next verse, verse 22. It says, but if injury comes, you shall account for it with bruise for bruise, wound for wound, life for life. So they used a factual statement to communicate a falsehood. So that's something that she picked up. This stuff is significant. And if we abandon it in our discussions, our whole society is going to go into catastrophe. Open your Bibles. Going to Ezra. Who's got a Bible? Everybody need a Bible? You got a Bible? You got it right there? Now, I got to find it. I think it's, which part of Ezra? We're going to go to Ezra. Now, what chapter was that?
Ezra what?
Ezra, I think chapter 5. Actually, it's going to be 4. I'm going to take you over to verse 11. In Ezra is a scribe. There's a bunch of guys working on putting the temple back into shape. They've been sent back. King Cyrus the Great said, go back, build your temple, have a good time. Big edict, glorifying God, and gave them the authority and power and money to go back and build the temple and build the walls and all that. You can read Nehemiah. It's really exciting stuff. But I want you to look at something that happened, a political event that happened. And I want to use this as a model for what we see today. In verse 11, to King Artaxerxes, there's a big letter here. Look, to the men beyond the river and so forth. etc., etc., etc. See, they said stuff like that back then. Let it be known, the king, that the Jews who came up from you have come to us at Jerusalem, are building the rebellious and evil city and are finishing its walls, repairing the foundations. Let it be known to the king that if this city is built, the walls completed, they will not pay the tax, tribute, or custom, and the king's treasury will be diminished. Now, because we receive support from the palace, remember, you're bound to obey those upon whom you depend. It was not proper for us to see the king's dishonor. Therefore, we have sent and informed the king that search may be made in your records and find that, look, this city has been rebellious. We're in verse 15, harmful to kings and provinces, that they have incited sedition within the city in former times, for which cause the city was destroyed. We inform the king that the city is rebuilt, its walls are completed. The results will be that you will have no dominion beyond the river. They have expressed a moral imperative. A moral imperative. Guys, these guys are tax evaders. In fact, if you read, after Josiah, a little disruption that happened and Nebuchadnezzar came in, they wouldn't pay the tribute. Yeah, there were times that different guys that were assigned to be put in charge didn't pay the tax. So it was factually correct. And because of that, we fear. Remember, we have government because of our wants and our fears? We fear. There's a moral imperative here. The sky is falling, right? Sky is falling. Cancel all, what do you call those, bankruptcy laws, the uniform bankruptcy laws that in Article 1 Congress had the authority to do. Let's cancel all those and just take over Chrysler and give it to fiat by fiat. I mean, now you guys don't know what I'm talking about, but there's a moral imperative. We've got to do this. You don't understand how important it is. We fear the following things, so let's do this. Well, let's see what happens. See Ezra's approach. Let's see what we have. Okay. Here we go. Oh, and then what happened? They searched, and you know what they found in history books? Hey, these guys have been tax evaders. They were jerks. We had to crush them in the past. Okay, good idea. Let's stop what they're doing. Moral imperative. You've inspired us. We're going to cancel the progress. And that was in chapter 4, verses 18 through 21. Now, let's see what happens. I'm trying to skip a lot of this stuff to get to the point. They all got together, and they decided to send a report to King Darius and tell him what's going on and make an appeal. So we go to chapter 5, verse 6. The governor of the region beyond the river and all his companions, hello, 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 to Darius the king, all peace. Now we're in verse 8. Let it be known to the king that we went into the province to dedicate the temple of God. He was very forthright. We're building this temple. We're fixing these things, and we ask those elders, we command you to build this temple and finish these walls. So we're letting you know we're doing it. We're the guys right here. If you want to cut off our heads, we're the guys doing it. First of heaven and earth. This is notice they claimed their citizenship. We are the servants of God of heaven and earth, are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and completed. Now watch what they say is really the cause of their destruction. It wasn't because they were tax evaders. They say, because our fathers provoked God of heaven to wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple, carried the people away to Babylon. Do not be afraid to speak the truth and identify with your king, Christians. Don't be afraid. Do not be ashamed of the Lord Jesus. All these things we see are going to turn to dust. Verse 13, however, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to build this house of God. I told him about and verse 14 talks about the gold and silver and all the stuff that was given to him. In verse 15, take these articles, go carry them to the temple site as Jerusalem, let the house of God rebuilt in its former site. Blah, blah, blah. I want to show you something. Now, I never noticed this before I started studying law and government. In Ezra, we see the immoral imperative of the evil man. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all. And they said, this is a moral imperative. I can see a problem here. Isn't this justification for doing what our passion inspires us to do? Ezra went to a different thing. He stepped over here and said, King Darius, according to the law, according to the authority, if you'll look in the books, and that's what he did. He said, please go make a search in your records. and consider what the edict of King Cyrus was, that we are by his authority acting upon. We're being obedient to the law of the Medes and Persians. That does not alter. So I don't know if you'll ever notice this stuff in Scripture again. Hopefully you will. That this stuff I'm talking about, this whole frame, this is God's plan. This is God's frame. He's been using this from the very beginning. And we see an example of it here of a proper authority, an appeal to the authority of law and divine intervention, turning the heart of the king, of King Cyrus, the authority of God Almighty, turning the heart of King Cyrus to declare a law that Ezra cites as his authority for his behavior. Moral imperative, don't let them do this thing. We've got these accusations of what might happen, what we fear might happen because of what these guys had done in the past. Ezra said, it doesn't matter. Don't speculate. Go to court and try to speculate. Hopefully somebody will tell the judge, don't listen to him. Strike that off the record. There's no such thing as speculation in reality. Okay? What's the authority of law? So that's Ezra, chapters 4 through 6. Word of God. So Scripture shows us God's plan of authority structure. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'm scaring the daylights out of you guys. That's okay. It's good for you. All right. Prepare you for those really tough situations. Let's go to page 237. Page 237 of your book, we find the preamble, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure the domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and
secure the
blessings, liberty for ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Thank you, Miss Lynn, 5th grade. Bless her heart. So,
Schoolhouse Rock, baby.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. Section 1. Article 1 has a bunch of sections. The ones we're going to focus today, especially Section 1, it's got a very important statement there. Section 8 and 9 are the authorities and of what their granted powers are. And then number 9 is what they're not allowed to do. And in fact, in the Bible, when you get a king, make sure he does the following things. Read this law, do these 5 things, or out of these 5 things, do these 4, and make sure you don't do this 1. Okay, so even in Scripture, when it was time to build a government, God made a plan. Do the following things, don't do the other things. So that's section 8 and 9 of Article 1. Let's go to section 1. I need a reader. Matthew read last week. So, Jason, could you read for me? Section 1.
All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives.
Okay, I have a question. Legislative powers, what is that?
The powers of the legislator.
Yeah, we're going to use a different word other than legislature. The power to what?
Make rules.
I'm asking Jason.
Make rules.
Actually, federal regulations are rules. What we're going to do is talk about something else. You said rules? What's the better word? Legislation.
Slated.
Slated legis. What is the legis?
It's those things on the edge of cliffs.
Lex rex. Rex means king. Lex is... Ooh, see, there's something you're going to learn today. Lex rex means the law is king. Legislation means to make law. Rules guide people on how they can execute the law safely. Okay? So you can look in the federal regulations, find rules of how to act. Different publications that the bureaucracies make, they make rules. Okay? Courts have rules. They guide themselves with rules. But law is law. And we're actually going to see in Article 3 of this Constitution where it talks about law, equity, and the laws of the United States. So legislation, how many powers of legislation, Jason, is it? How much does it say? How much power have they been given? All legislative powers. That means it's not the president. It's not the judiciary. all legislative powers. That means none is implied in the executive and the legislative. Now, here's a caveat. This thing gives a boundary to it. All legislative powers, look at the next two words, herein granted. Laws that are granted powers. So we're going to see in Article 1 a granted power. They're limited. All laws are by the legislature. This is going to be Article 1, people. The folks that they describe in Article 1. They're guys, they have all. It's only them that can make the law according to the powers that are granted. If it's not granted, they have no authority. If they make a law, supposed law, with the power of making law, and it's outside this granted power, what is it?
Tyranny.
It's tyranny. Okay, very simple stuff. Now, how do you keep in check? That's everybody's responsibility. Something to think about. Okay, now, House of Representatives, it goes through the details. The House of Representatives, they get elected every 2 years, so that means that your passions as a person electing them can sway lots. The passions, the int of the people affects the legislature every 2 years. You could pink slip the entire Congress, the House of Representatives, every 2 years. You could fire every one of them every 2 years with your own passions, the passions of the people. So based on what we talked last week, there were three elements of government. There was a monarchy element of government, there was an aristocracy element of government, and there was a democracy element of government. This would be the democracy element of government. The passions of the people have their sway. One of the things that is important for you to know, which you may have heard, is it tells you how old you can be, 25 years old, so you can be passionate, young, and crazy without much experience and be in the House of Representatives. Look at the next page. Go to page 238. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included, etc., etc., etc. Trying to think where the details come. Oh, go to the next page, 240. Section 7, legislative powers, making law. All bills, how many bills?
All.
For raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments, as it says amendments, as with other bills. Okay? So if it's a money issue, it's not allowed to be generated in the Senate. It's not allowed to be generated in the presidency or in the court system. Okay? So all bills for raising revenue, for raising taxes, come from the House. And I'll tell you something which is a great error that's happened just in the last 2 years. There's a moral imperative. We've got a budget crisis. We've got a political crisis. We had a big change of the Senate coming, an election coming up, and there needed to be a new health care plan, and all kinds of weird little things were coming up. And so what they did is they came up with a super committee that all these plans for raising revenue, spending, and taxing, they're tied together. Originally, you raised a tax for a particular spending. They were linked. It's since got a little bit foggy. But what they did is they came up with a super committee where the legislature or the House of Representatives would come up with 6 people. And then the Senate would come up with 6 people, and they would get together and come up with a big spending budget plan and then bring it back to those separate houses because of a moral imperative. That's exercise of tyranny. It's outside their authority. They should be ashamed of themselves. What happens is we don't have a clue who those guys are who now become a super, that's the term they use, House of Representatives. So most Americans haven't had this discussion, and it happened right in front of their face, and nobody squeaked. Nobody cared. Nobody understood that it went very contrary to the House, to this very Constitution. Okay? So that's a little bit of information that's popped up. And that's a moral issue. It's not political. If you violate the law, it's a moral issue. It's not political. Okay? Killing of the unborn is a moral issue. It's not political. So let's go to the next issue. Okay, the next thing, the Senate. Now watch. Oh, wait. Okay. The Senate of the United States shall be composed. Oh, before I go on, I do have to say something. Look on page 238. At the very top, it says representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among several states, blah, 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 blah. Notice that they put and direct taxes in italics. There's some things in here where there was an amendment to the Constitution where those things became obsolete or changed. Okay, like say for instance, if there's no more slavery, there's this weird thing about other persons and stuff like that. All these ideas of whether a slave is three-fifths of a person, all that stuff became obsolete. The only problem is the words are still there. They didn't go away, and the italicized stuff is the interpretation of a Becca book. Congress still has the authority to do direct taxes apportioned among the several states, within keeping of the whole framework of whether they would appropriate it according to people's property values or the numbers of heads in the various states. And a direct tax would be, Isaac, you haven't done anything, you haven't been employed, but you're there, you're living there, you're under Virginia's protection, so I'm going to count Virginia for the quota that's associated with your head. They can still have the authority to direct taxes. They still do. That's not where they get their stuff. They get it through the income tax. 16th Amendment brought an income tax, a tax on incomes that wasn't really defined until the Supreme Court defined it later. But an income tax isn't a direct tax. It's determined by the Supreme Court to be an excise tax. They said recently the healthcare law is an excise tax. So that 16th Amendment didn't nullify this that's already here. A Becca book, with a little confusion, put the direct taxes in italics as if it didn't apply. It's not being used, but it still applies. It's still law. Okay, Senate. Let's go down to the Senate. House of Representatives is the democracy element of government. I want you to look at the Senate here. Okay, Jason, you really did a good job. Read section 3 of the Senate, that first paragraph.
The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislator thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Immediately.
Well, that's good, that's good. The italicized part here is that there's been an amendment to the Constitution to where the senator is chosen by the election. The same way that somebody represents you in the House of Representatives, that you would elect that senator the same way. But I want you to stop for a second. Did you look at what it used to be? That the Senate, 2 people from each state, every state had an equal representation. 2 people would go to the Senate. They would serve, you'd find here, for 6 years. They have to be older. They have to be at least 30 years old. And they're chosen by the discretion of people, of the lawmakers of your particular state would get together and select people arbitrarily, some say, maybe politically, or what? What would be the parallel in what we read last week about Blackstone describing the aristocracy? What was the purpose of an aristocracy? What benefit did they bring? Nobody knows? Yes? Okay. Wisdom? What were you going to say? Okay. Where were they who were they?
They were the elite.
The elite.
Intelligent.
So it wasn't the House of Commons. It was the House of
Smart people.
the Lords. And they were lords temporal and spiritual. Blackstone described because of their property, their position, their power, their experience, their wisdom, their notoriety. It would be, they were selected and put into that position because of their experience. That was the aristocracy that Blackstone described. The Senate was designed to be that aristocracy, but we don't have a property necessarily titled aristocracy in America. What they did is they said, okay, each state, find your way to determine who those people of character and wisdom are. If you want to leave it to the people and have a big election, well, that's up to that state legislature to decide. If you leave it up, you could leave it up to your governor, potentially. Let the legislature make a law that says every 6 years, every 2 years or whatever, the governor is going to appoint somebody to be the senator who's going to serve and, justify it for whoever. They left it in the care of the states to determine who that aristocracy would be. That was the intention of this. Oh, by the way, if it's been changed in the Constitution, there's amendments to the Constitution that have been repealed. Okay? So it's something to think about. So just want to let you know that it did change with an amendment. Well, now it's merely the passions of it's digressed, I think, to the passions of the people and political marketing. Okay? I mean, and power. So there's influence in getting them there. But notice they do have to be a little bit older. And hopefully, one thing I see when I watched a debate between then running for Senate in Illinois, Mr. Obama, versus Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes was a diplomat for many years. And so Alan Keyes was like subject matter expert on foreign diplomacy. I mean, they asked him questions, and he was so well educated. And I thought, well, he would be great for somebody if they said, who would be good because they know the principles. If they were selected, more of a, let's select you, So, but again, it depends on who's in power at the time. Where Mr. Obama, had some interesting statements, but they really geared to the common guy who really doesn't know anything. I mean, it really did appear to your feelings, the kind of answers that he had. Well, I think there was a lot of that stuff in his answers, where the other guy was saying that this is the history, and this is why we're doing it this way, and this is the results if you change it, So it's something to think about. Now, so who was the aristocracy in government, of the new government?
The Senate.
The Senate. They're the aristocracy. In Article 3, there's a little bit another one. In the olden days, Blackstone described that their branches of government was the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the King, as the legislative produces law and executes law and stuff like that. That was the third branch of government, not the court, because the court worked for the king. Okay, so it was actually part of the executive department. We're going to see something change here. Okay, Section 9. And somebody who's a girl, and you don't want me to select you, so you're going to have courage and just volunteer. Because I'm scary. What's Section 9? What's it called? A girl. Oh, you girls are quiet. Mariah doesn't answer questions. Courtney doesn't. Sarah doesn't. Sarah's very quiet. I was told. So do I always have to ask Aaliyah? No, I'm going to ask Sarah. What's Section 9? What's it say?
Powers denied to Congress.
Big. Powers denied. Absolutely. If you see Congress doing it, they shouldn't be doing it. But all legislative power, with these powers granted herein, is left with the legislature. So that means if it's exercised as a power by the executive, they shouldn't be doing it. If it's a power that's being exercised by the court, if it's something denied to Congress that, hey, you can't do this, then it probably shouldn't be done, unless obviously it's something particular, very squarely, particularly granted them in their particular section of the Constitution. Habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion in public safety may require of it. Now, open up, get your Blackstone thing. The one that was the absolute rights of individuals. The assignment. And I don't even have mine. Absolute rights of individuals.
You need one?
Yeah, I'll rent one. Page 10. It's here somewhere. Okay. Without, you can look in there, but does anybody remember habeas corpus in here? Can you, and if you don't answer, that means nobody remembers it. Everybody read it, nobody remembers it. Does anybody know what is habeas corpus? Nobody knows? I actually said it in here.
Isn't that the right to come before a court?
Right to come before a court. Yeah, personally. Okay?
Doesn't it say something, you have the right to appear before the king's court?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it says produce the body.
Yeah.
That's what habeas corpus is. Show us the body. We heard that you have taken somebody and put them off in the hoosgow. They have a right to make a claim to the court saying a writ of habeas corpus. You give that over to the court or even to your jailer and say, I am claiming this right. I want you to bring my body before this other party who can objectively look at this situation, and you're going to have to show cause to them why you're in the hoosgow. How has this come up recently? Does anybody know? Too much time playing video games. It's okay to play video games, just not too much time. You guys don't know any place this has come up recently? Courtney, you don't have any idea where this has come up? Homeschoolers? You're daring me to go ask a public schooler if they know this. If nobody knows where this has come up recently? Matthew, you don't know?
You say they're in the who's gal. I have no idea what you're saying.
That's a jail.
Okay. Sorry.
State
The Tower of London.
bounds of the question.
Okay, I will state it. You don't know a situation, if somebody's taking you off, in this case, up to the Tower of London, put you away someplace without a trial, and will keep you there and just as long as they feel like it. I know. Wait, no, not Hunter. Anybody? Anyone else besides Hunter? Yeah, Hunter, go ahead, tell me.
Is the George Zimmerman trial?
George Zimmerman trial. No, but
Because he wasn't technically arrested, but he was detained.
okay. There is a principle in law where the legislature has boundaries for detaining people under certain circumstances, and they've deemed it not really too much of an infringement on their liberty, considering the situation. But they give him an opportunity for bail. In fact, there's laws that say you have to be brought before a magistrate within 72 hours, could be 42 hours, and given an opportunity to post bail until you have a due process trial. But yeah, so that's in the right, that's exactly why they have that, okay? What you just described. Anybody know where people are taken off to jail? Okay. In this provision here, so this is where, now you have to go off on vacation and read section pages 9 through 11 during your off time. And I'm gonna have to figure out some way to put this in a testing material so you'll understand this. Recently, you've heard the term of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and that there was an act by Congress that would allow, they find people who are hostile enemy combatants or aliens, hostile aliens, somebody who's not a U.S. citizen, and they can take them and put them in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, or whatever, and never have a trial, possibly. And so people are up in arms, oh, wait, you know, they're not U.S. citizens, we can do anything we want. Well, no, because if you go on the Constitution, you read about all trial of all crimes against all persons, it didn't say citizens, trials of all crimes shall be done the following way. So there was a cry that came out where people said, wait a minute, we can't just go do everything we want willy-nilly. We've got this Constitution. So what Congress did, they went and reviewed the situation, and they came out with a law that literally suspended habeas corpus under certain divine circumstances. And then that was reviewed by the Supreme Court, and they said, well, this thing you've done so far, that's in keeping with the Constitution and the history of law. This other thing you've done right here, that doesn't fit anything. You're making that up. You don't have the authority to do that. So if you do it, you're violating the law. Okay? So what's happening right now, if there's somebody who is against the United States or something like that, and you fear for your security, the king would be, used to be the king would say, hey, Isaac, I'm putting you in the Tower of London. Just shut up, get him out of here. In fact, blindfold him, stuff a gag in his mouth, and get him out of here as fast as possible. And a lot of times it could have been done for political reasons. Okay, they took pastors in many cases and did that. They didn't like what they had to say. That's treasonous. You don't like what the king's doing on weekends, away from his wife? When you speak against it from the pulpit, that's treasonous. You're going to the Tower of London. No trial. Okay? So that was the history. And what they did is they put the responsibility in the hands of Congress to determine when, under certain circumstances, that the safety and security of the nation is so great, under the certain circumstances for a short period of time, that they would very deliberately suspend this habeas corpus rule. So that way, because right now, if the executive is fearful of a terrorist, and they don't really have the evidence, they just have this, all these arrows pointing in the right directions, but nothing that would really qualify in a court of law, they'll put them away, because they know they can't just put them in a court and try them, because they'll be exonerated, back out blowing up our buses. Okay, so that's what habeas corpus is a law that provides everybody the right to say, one branch of government can't take me off and put me in jail without being accountable to somebody else. That's what the writ of habeas corpus is. In this case, it says that Congress, so look what it says, section 9, privilege of writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. Does it say a right? Notice it said privilege? Have you guys, I want you to take note of this too, I only have a few minutes. But I want you to see in here that there's a word privilege. I've heard a lot of people tell me, oh, that's just on different issues. That's just a privilege, that's not a right. Has anybody else heard that?
When
Well,
when
you're
I
in a-
got my driver's license, to say this is a privilege, not a right.
Well, actually, you say it's a privilege, Your Honor, not an immunity. Because the two sides of the coin, there's heads and tails on a coin, and as far as rights go, there's what they call privileges, and the flip side is immunity. And what you're going to see in the Constitution is this term privileges and immunities. Privilege is something that is right for you to do. And an immunity would be something that would not be right for somebody to take from you. And that is something that when you read the absolute rights of individuals, it kind of talked about those things that are absolute rights in a state of nature, that even if you enter in a case of society, nobody can take that away from you. They can't pass a law. In other words, you have an absolute right to obey God. Absolutely. I don't care what clubs you join, that is an obligation you're always going to have. So you'd be immune from any law that would cause you to violate that absolute duty. Okay? So there's privileges and immunity. A privilege would be something that is right for you to do. An immunity would be something that you're free and protected. In fact, the government is instituted to protect you in your immunities. Okay? So look what it says here. The privilege of a writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended, unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. But it's Congress's right to do. No bill of attainder, we'll talk about these kind of things later. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back before next Thursday night, by next Friday. Since some of you would like, I know you just passionately would like to get back into this, starting next Friday at the very least. I highly doubt that that's, I doubt that that's actually true, but it might be that somebody wants to get into it by Friday. By Thursday night, what I'm going to do is send you your assignment for the next period of this class, okay? So, and what I may do, I may just define those things that I thought were important in this absolute rights of individuals that we're going to be covering, as we're going to be seeing as we progress along here. What I'll probably do is turn that into questions again and say, what does it say about this? And then it'll come up, and then we'll see it show up in the Bill of Rights. We'll see it in Article 3 when they start talking about laws and what the judiciary does. We'll be seeing in the King's prerogative that showed up in the executive powers that show up in Article 2 of the Constitution. So what I'm going to do is try to maybe take what I've given you and then very focused, give you very focused questions, tell you what page it is and the kind of thing I'm looking for. Okay? That's it. So you guys aren't having fun, are you?
I mean, it's very interesting.
Oh, good.
It is.
That's good. Okay, so that's it. And also, if you have any question about anything that pops up, anything weird, you see something in the news, anything like that. Oh, wait, stop. Just one more thing. I still have time. This happened. Last week we read from James Madison. He was talking about virtue, that it's imperative for the people to put people in office that have virtue. All right? Oh, guess I was doing a radio show yesterday, and what was in the news? A conservative family values Republican congressman, a news agency had found a transcript from a recording he made of a telephone conversation with his mistress, putting pressure on her to abort her unborn baby. That was his.
Who was that? Who was it?
Desjardins, I can't say it's French. It's in Tennessee. Look up Tennessee Congressman tape. So that came up in the news yesterday. And you know what I did for my radio show?
Keeps a transcript of a phone call.
Of a
How
phone call.
stupid are you?
And he I know, it's a long story. And guess who made the tape? He did.
He did.
Yes, you read that news article. Okay, what I did yesterday
No, that's just.
to the Tennessee audience is I brought it up and I said, well, this is what's claimed against the guy, so I brought up a few issues. It was really encouraging to come right back to this textbook and quote James Madison about virtue. And then I ended up closing the show yesterday quoting the big speech from Benjamin Franklin about prayer, okay? So it was really helpful to me to have these conversations. Yesterday it was just, oh my goodness, because I changed my topic, when that popped up. It was, in fact, I was like, well, let me just go back one more time, see what's happening in Tennessee. And sure enough, oh my goodness, okay? So this stuff will matter, and you're going to see as time goes on now, you're going to see the things that pop up. And you're going to realize shouldn't just be your passion. Oh, we fear this. There's going to be an authority structure tied to whatever subject that comes up. Okay, so I encourage you to go to the Bible, and then, of course, keeping in the biblical principles, see how it lines up with the Constitution. Yes?